Okay, I think that we can get started. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all our attendees across the globe. I'd like to give you all a warm welcome to our last panel for the day, whose agenda is essentially to discover the development and implementation of AI integration policies. We will also aim to cover steps we can take for ethical and equitable AI adoption in higher education. I'd also like to mention that this session aims to show an example of how educators, admins, and students can sit on the same panel to discuss certain topics with different viewpoints. And I feel this is something that the participants can replicate at their own institutions, right? Fun fact, that's the reason why we've got UIUC and educators and students only. A warm welcome to you all. My name is Konal Dingreja. I'm a rising junior at the University of Illinois studying electrical engineering. I will be the moderator for the session and encourage all our attendees to ask our panelists any questions they have in the Q&A down below. So yeah, let's get started with the introductions for who we got on here, right? So, oh, I see we just got Professor William Cope here too. Warm welcome to you, sir. Just giving a brief introduction about who he is. He is a professor in the Department of Educational Policy, Organization, and Leadership at the University of Illinois. His recent research has involved the development and application of AI in education, including generative AI. His work has received support from a number of major grants, from the US Department of Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the National Science Foundation. So we are also joined by Dr. Tawnya Means, who is the Assistant Dean for Educational Innovation and the Chief Learning Officer at the Gies College of Business at UIUC. She possesses more than 20 years of experience in higher education, course design, and has taught blended courses in entrepreneurship, strategy, technology, and leadership. So I'd also like to welcome Dr. Lawrence Angrave, who is an award-winning teaching professor in the CS department at UIUC. His research includes innovative teaching, playful learning, and creating opportunities for accessible and inclusive equitable education, an important topic that we'll be covering in this panel. We also are joined by Dr. Gina Kang, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at UIUC. She received a PhD in Educational Technologies from UT Austin and holds an MS and a bachelor's in Astronomy and Space Science, which sounds pretty cool, right? Her research centers on three interrelated areas: data science, data-driven design, and STEM education. And last but not the least, we have Rohan, who is a rising junior studying CS plus math with a minor in business. He is currently interning at Cisco as a software engineer, and his interests are in AI, robotics, and networking. Rohan will join me in presenting our key observations and perspectives as students. So let's start off, shall we? I would like to ask a general question for all our professors to answer on here. So the question is as follows. I'd like to start off with Dr. Means, because I feel this is something that she might have some expertise on as well. So could you delve into some successful policies or strategies that have facilitated the adoption of AI in the educational sector? And what are the predominant challenges that educational institutions grapple when they are trying to incorporate AI-related educational policies?
Thank you very much for that question and for the opportunity to be on this panel. I really appreciate the opportunity for this discussion to happen. You've asked a very big question. I think I would start by saying some of the challenges are that, first of all, this idea of generative AI is new to a lot of people. So we've had artificial intelligence research going on for many, many years, and we've had kind of slow and steady progress happening across this time period. And we've had places in which the most institutions have had at least some way of integrating some form of artificial intelligence into what they're doing. But with the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT and other generative AI tools that have followed after it, we have an explosion into almost every single aspect of our lives, and not just in education, but everything that we do. And it's moving so quickly that there are a lot of people with some significant anxiety, some excitement, and some pretty big concerns about what happens next and how to keep up. And there's so much information out there that it's very difficult to know how to pay attention to the right information, how to evaluate the sources and the ideas, and how to connect what we're doing as educators with what needs to happen in order for us to continue being educators.
Correct. That was a pretty good answer. And just to follow up, right? Because you are the chief learning officer at the Gies College of Business. Now, when it comes to business, we talk a lot about like having that practical learning implemented into education. So, is there any progress that you guys have made when it comes to this particular aspect?
Absolutely. We've been working with a number of our faculty to experiment with different aspects of how we can use generative AI and other artificial intelligence to be able to influence our students' experience. So everything from the kinds of assignments that we give, the ways that we can incorporate giving students feedback or scoring their work to give them quick responses to the work that they do, giving them ways to explore the technologies and be able to find out how they can adapt to using them in their day-to-day lives. And there are a lot of opportunities for us, and many of our instructors are very excited and interested in exploring it and expanding it. We actually are in a period of review for some applications for faculty who have submitted projects that they would like to explore using innovative teaching, but specifically several of the applicants are focused on ways that they can use generative AI in exploring ways to enhance their teaching, but also to take what they learn from that teaching experience and share it with their peers.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thanks for your response to that question. I would actually try to also want to direct that same question to Professor Cope, since he is a professor in the Department of Education Policy. So, Dr. Cope, if you could, talk a little bit about what your viewpoint is regarding the education policies we should implement with regards to AI integration in education.
Okay, thanks for asking me that question. So just as a bit of background, I mean, I've been working in this area about, technology mediated learning for a long, long time. And the speed in which things have developed in the last year or so has been a surprise to even those who've worked in this area for a very, very long time. And the generative AI stuff, does present some enormous challenges. In education, we've been quite used to having plagiarism checkers on is it the student's work? There is actually no way of knowing whether a piece of work that's been created or an answer that's been given by a student is created by the student or AI without the most rigorous of proctoring. So in other words, interestingly, OpenAI has just closed down its AI checker because it doesn't work. So because every text that's created and every answer that's given is unique, there is no way of ever knowing that. And a funny thing, actually, an educational researcher in the United Kingdom who's worked in this area for a long, long time, they've said their phrase is it's democratized cheating, because before you had to pay to get somebody to write your essay. Now you don't have to pay. It's super cheap to get it done. So look, this is a pretty fundamental problem, to be quite frank, and it really has turned around. It throws the proverbial cat amongst the pigeons in a whole lot of ways. So look, there is no alternative but to use it in our classes. There is no alternative but to get it explicitly used by students because they're going to use it anyhow. So let's not pretend that they're not going to. So what we've done in the College of Ed, we've been very lucky over a number of years that we've had grants to build, and you mentioned in that little introduction you did for me, to build alternative models of how learning involves. And we've already built via an API, we've built a generative AI feedback system into the platform that we use, which is called CG Scholar. And we've already got all our students using AI to provide feedback to the work that they do. But the great advantage of this is we see the feedback they get. We ask them to declare the ways in which the feedback influenced the revisions that they've done. And we also ask people using the same prompts to review each other's work, and then to compare the AI review with the peer review, the human review. So in other words, we're being completely upfront about this. And look, we've been taken back by a lot of it, and that is that the AI reviews of student work and the feedback are remarkably comprehensive. They're interestingly very helpful in some ways, and irredeemably wrong in a number of ways. So, it's impossible for AI to distinguish facts from things that are not facts. There's no disciplinary frameworks in the AI environment, but it's incredibly good at giving feedback around argumentation, about genre and whatever. So what we do is we say to students, okay, look, check each other's facts as human beings. Don't rely on any of the facts that come out. So in other words, we've been working hard to try and work out how we can use it constructively, bearing in mind that it's inevitable that people are going to use it. So that's a quick summary of where we've come at this particular issue.
Okay, it's very nice.
I'd love to extend just a little bit of what Dr. Cope is saying, and the idea that the humans need to be involved in that process, that there's a human element and a machine element, and we're trying to figure out how the two work together and which one does what better. And so I think that's really key, is to recognize that there are things that humans are really good at, and we should keep doing those things. And there are things that machines are better at, and we should let the machines do those things.
Yeah, they're complementary. And look, frankly, we've been surprised by a number of things. We thought that, well, a couple of discoveries, and we've published an article about this, which is in Archive, but one thing we're interested in is that the AI feedback is more comprehensive than is reasonable for any human to create. That's interesting. It's more critical, actually, than humans are willing to be to each other in a peer review context. So we've had a whole pile of incredibly interesting results that have come out of this. So yeah, interesting times, so to speak, and very problematic times all at once.
Definitely. And one thing that I feel that we as students seek when it comes to education is that we want to be prepared for the real world, right? We want to be prepared to work more efficiently and more productively in industry. And, after interning at certain companies and just seeing and observing what's being implemented in industry, a lot of interviewers, a lot of recruiters are asking students about their experience of working with AI, because like I said, right, all employees want their students to have the greatest amount of productivity that's possible. So this is one question that I wanted to ask Professor Angrave, actually. This is one concern a lot of CS students have. Is my job going to be replaced by AI? Am I going to have a software engineering role after 5 years or not? So what progress has the CS department that you work at done when it comes to the implementation of AI into education? What's your stance on that?
Oh, wow. Again, good question. And I just, sorry, let me just kind of quick, let me type that into ChatGPT. First of all, I think as faculty, we appreciate that it is moving very quickly. And that it's very hard to say change a program at scale to accommodate these items. On the other hand, CS, like Gies, is also kind of very interested in innovation. And if you look at some of the edge stuff going on, you'll see all sorts of exciting things. So first of all, to kind of wave a project that I'm involved with, which is actually inspired from Gies, which is, can we create a book from a video? And can we make our education more inclusive, right? And so these kinds of ideas are very much kind of built on some of the latest advances in AI, the ability, for example, to have accurate captions. Turns out that machines aren't perfect, but we can crowdsource it with humans to get it better. It turns out that we need to take the video and chunk it up into other parts. And if we do this, several things can happen. First of all, you have inclusive items, but secondly, you actually get students excited and motivated about computer science. Right. Second comment is that we're doing a lot of kind of independent study projects and other items where we're testing the waters with these things. It's very easy to move faster in these kinds of projects where we can understand how impactful these tools and techniques can be before we scale them out to classes which have, say, 200 or 1,000 or more students. But things have changed. We used to be able to kind of happily correlate production with learning, right? And civil production with ability. That's no longer quite true. Now, to get to the nub of your question of like, will I have a job? First of all, appreciate that these tools are mediocre. They are built on like all output, right? So first of all, we just like look at all the code on GitHub and Stack Overflow and everywhere else, right? A lot of that is pretty bad code and is not kind of compatible or not similar, I hope, to what an Illinois student might be producing at the end of their degree. And so I often view the output of these tools as the equivalent of yesterday's first draft. And it perhaps is better to say things like, will I have a job if I only could work with a piece of paper versus a laptop with a network connection? Our expectations of what people can do as soon as we kind of add interesting IT around them is greater. So I think that a better question might be not will I have a job, but what will my job look like in 2 years or 5 years? I am perfectly happy to speculate, and as a card-carrying faculty member, I can give you more than one opinion, but I can't tell you which one of those opinions is going to be correct. What I think is true though is that we can make some guesses today, and one of them might be correct. But many of our guesses about what your job might look like in 2 years or 5 years are probably going to be wrong. We don't know how far the math is going to take us today. We do know that by spending close to like $500 million on these kinds of models, we've generated something fantastic that can replace the blank piece of paper. And so we do know that critical skills, evaluation skills, the ability to be persuasive, the ability to create things and not think about like the details of code anymore, but to think about what am I trying to achieve? We do know those things are going to be important, but we don't know what the actual kind of work life is going to be. And we don't know what the security or safety implications are going to be when people start kind of picking up these toys and playing with them and making assumptions that the output of them is correct or safe to use.
I think one of the things I would bring into to bear on that also is the idea that, at least in business, we expect that with experience, someone in the workplace would be able to start to collaborate and build off the work of other people, as well as to evaluate and critically review the work of other people. And so this gives an opportunity for people earlier in their career to be able to do that work and to be able to use it as a launching point when they go into an interview or even in their day-to-day work, to be able to say, I have experience evaluating the work of others. Yes, those others happen to be bots, but I'm still able to do that in a meaningful way much earlier in my career.
Yep. And looking at my perspective as a student right now, Professor Angrave spoke about how a lot of the output that some of these generative AI tools give to us, it's incorrect at times. Now, suppose I'm an electrical engineering major. I don't know much about software, but when I have a software element, and if I'm using ChatGPT to teach me a few things, if I see that there is, I cannot like come to know whether the response that they've given me is right or wrong. Now, a lot of students, they tend to think that whatever ChatGPT or any other AI tool gives out is the gospel truth. However, that's incorrect. So that's one thing that I feel must be really communicated to our students, right? Because we do have the concept of office hours and asking questions to our instructors during lecture. However, what if I have a question at midnight just before my exam? What am I going to do? I'm probably going to call a friend, rely and trust what he has to offer, or I'm going to just go on ChatGPT and ask them to explain some concept to me, right? So I'd actually like to direct one question to Professor Kang. She is a professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at UIUC. So what does she think we should implement at the higher education level when it comes to this issue that students are taking to AI tools for learning new concepts that they do not understand in classroom? Is it valid or not?
That's a good question. I think there are a lot of different issues right now that was caused by those generative AI tools. That one of the things that we now like everyone here has been talking about, what are the like how can we, what changes can AI bring to the like design of assessment and curriculum, right? And how do we make homework better, or even like how do we prepare students to succeed in that world maybe over the next 10 to 20 years? That so like I think this is the time that we really need to think about like what are the essential skill sets required for like every individual to learn. I think there are the different skill sets you can learn from the classrooms, right? Like even just getting some different information, gathering information from like, let's say ChatGPT, that's one skill set you might be able to develop. But you need to also validate that information, like the information is really correct or not. That's the skills that you need to develop, or we as an instructor, we need to incorporate that into our curriculum and designing, when we design, especially assignments or class projects. So I think it is like worth to, or it is valuable to learn all different types of skills, but now like what else like or what kind of change we need to make. I think that's one of the critical thing that we need to think about. And I think one of the things probably is the critical thinking skills. That's probably the really essential skill, one of the essential skill set that we might need to consider to the curriculum and instruction, especially for designing those activities and assignments as well. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, that does answer my question. And there was a wonderful point that you brought up at the end, which is about the lack of critical thinking skills that might be within us students if we're just going to be heavily reliant just on AI, right? Because one thing that I feel as a person that makes me special is that ChatGPT and other AI tools might have a lot of ideas that they can generate within a few seconds. However, I still feel that it is finite. I feel that what makes me special as a human is that my thinking is infinite, right? So, including that perspective, I feel is very important, which is why I would like to ask Rohan, our student panelist here, a very important question. That Rohan, you're studying CS plus math, and you're also minoring in business, which is an all-rounded education, I suppose. So, I'm pretty sure that you might have seen certain changes that AI has made when it comes to your education in these various fields, right? So could you describe to us how and whether AI has been a curse or a boon for you throughout this 1 year of the AI boom?
Sure. So before I actually answer that question, once again, I mean, you've been asking quite a few really good questions. But before I answer, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity, Quinark. Thank you so much for everyone for attending. It's really nice to meet you guys and hear from you guys, all professors. It feels just great being here. But to answer that question, I'd say it's a bit of both. It's both, you can learn a lot from it, but also it is a bit of a, there's basically pros and cons to it. I'd say some of the pros is that, well, at least with some of the, from a student perspective, say there's a coding assignment, right? Sometimes I've realized, especially within computer science, there are tools like obviously ChatGPT, which a lot of people know about, a lot of people use, but then there's also tools like GitHub Copilot, which essentially is a autocomplete tool for coding. But what I realized about these tools is that even through using them for complex coding assignments, they don't necessarily, they have two downsides. One is that the student, obviously, they're not being intuitive with the solution. They're not coming up with solutions on their own. And second, that these tools, they're not 100% accurate. There's not much, they're not always giving you the right solution. So we're just students would blindly trust these AI models to develop the solution for them. So in doing so, again, not only are they not thinking themselves, but they're also just, they're not going to learn anything from it. And it would just be detrimental as a whole. So that's what I realized. But what I realized is a benefit of these tools, for example, in like a simple coding assignment, is that rather, even though they won't give you like, here's the answer, here's my question, here's the answer, they won't do that. It will sort of put you on the right track as to, I'm a little bit confused on this specific problem. It'll give you some information to make you realize, oh, this is the way I have to think about something. This is like, the path. I'm not confused anymore on what I'm working on, right? So that's how I see it, as a bit of a gift, a bit helpful. But I would say overall, the more, these tools, as the professors have gone through, AI is becoming it's becoming massive in our and massive just all over the world. Everyone's talking about it. It's all over the news. There's so many different AI models. We have ChatGPT right now. There's going to be so many more things coming out from other companies, their own AI models. And, even things like ChatGPT they're open source. So we'll see students, especially in, UIUC, come up with their own AI bots using the open source code from from GPT and OpenAI. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more. And, as one of the professors stated earlier, like the development and just the speed at which things are going, it's been really fast. So I'd say, to answer your question, I'd say it would be both a gift and a curse, and both, just overall, it's helpful and hurtful and towards learning. That's my perspective of it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And I think this is one thing that all professors and all of us students, right, Rohan and I, we've seen that like a lot of courses, like the assignments, right? If you use ChatGPT or you use any other AI tools, if your assignment is influenced even a bit, a lot of professors actually give you a straight 0 on the assignment, and some also give you a grade deduction, which is not going to be sweet, right? So one thing that I really wanted to explore during this panel is how ethical can we even consider the usage of AI, right? Because I also have had friends whose instructors have encourage the use of AI and ask the students to demonstrate how they used it and whether it was helpful or not. So I would like to ask the professors on here, like, how ethical is ethical, like what boundaries are we considering here, and what repercussions or advantages students might face while using an AI tool for their assignments, to enhance their assignments. Anyone would like to speak about that?
I can speak broadly from an administrator standpoint, some of the things that we're doing to try and help our faculty to know what they should do and how to communicate to students. I'm putting into the chat a link to some guidance that we've provided to our faculty within the college of how to think about the use of these tools in completion of student work. One of the things that we've asked our faculty to do is, first of all, to just gain awareness, learn for themselves about what these tools are capable of and what kinds of ways that can adapt their teaching. and then to do an audit of their class and to identify the things that maybe are more vulnerable to being used by to answer questions with generative AI. I'm seeing a note that there's a problem for needing to sign in. I'll put the link that's the public link in just a few minutes when I finish speaking. But the idea is that we've asked our faculty to review their assignments and their activities and make sure that they are things that if there is something that could be done with AI, to clearly communicate that to their students so that it's a conversation that they're having very early on in the course, to be able to say, this is what I expect from you as a student, this is why I expect it, and this is how I'm going to evaluate you. So it's not something that students are left questioning, am I supposed to use this tool? Am I not supposed to use this tool? What should I, how should I cite it? Or if I do use it, am I using it correctly? And so being clear with students about those expectations from very early on is really important. And then going through and finding out ways that they can adapt those assignments and activities. You obviously can't jump in and do everything all at once. It's too much. So look at the things that are most important to evaluate, to change, and adapt those first, and then keep working on it iteratively until you've made it a more meaningful experience for your students. And then to just share with each other. I mean, I think the time is pretty much ending of when I, as a professor, go into my classroom and it's a closed environment where no one else sees what I'm doing and it's just me and the students. I think that the world has changed so much, and we need to use that opportunity to share with each other. Here's what I'm doing in my class. What are you doing in your class? This is how I'm teaching this aspect of my class. How are you doing it? And so we can have more conversations and share with each other. And then just finally, just to be able to recognize that that we need to teach our students, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that information literacy of how to identify what is, I mean, we know that these tools hallucinate, that they make facts up, that they make things that sound really good, but they're not. And we need to be able to teach students to know the difference.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I just feel that we needed to address this fact, right? That like, what exactly are we going to be considering ethical? Like, what is ethical and what isn't, right? Like, this is a point that even Professor Kang brought up, and I'm going to bring up again, is the fact that about the creativity, the critical thinking skills that we must possess. But I also believe that there's a certain amount of knowledge, like underlying knowledge, that we need to have as students, right? So that we could even think critically in the first place. You cannot innovate something unless you know what exactly you're supposed to innovate, right? So there's something I'd like to ask Professor Cope as to again, like, what do you think is really the ethical use of AI in education? What are some policies that educators can implement to make sure that they're not losing out on the critical thinking skills, outside the box thinking skills?
I mean, look, one of the problems is that we can kind of pontificate about being ethical and tell students to be ethical, and they're not going to be ethical. The interesting thing is this article that I read by the educator in England who called it democratizing cheating. Apparently, I mean, he quoted an estimate where he thought that 15% of higher ed submissions were written by paper mills. So before this, before the GPT phenomenon, you could pay $50, $100, goodness knows what, and somebody in somewhere in the world, somewhere where the labor's cheaper, would write the essay for you and you submit it. So one of the things is telling not realistic. I mean, some may be ethical and some may not be ethical, and we're never going to know who's ethical and who's not. In the era of when plagiarism checkers worked, it was possible to know who was ethical. You could run a plagiarism checkers. Not only don't work, in the nature of this technology, they can never work. There's probably no way of ever reverse engineering whether the machines produce the work or the student. Now, our solution, and this is something we've kind of literally built in software, is to build a review process via prompt engineering, which is more helpful than what you can be just by going into the GPT. We're using OpenAI GPT, which is more useful than you going in there yourself. So to explain what we've done is we have 10 criteria, and we run a student's work through their whole work through the GPT 10 times, and the criteria are actually several hundred words long, right? So they're extremely elaborated rubrics, which is one about theory, one about facts, one about, anyhow, 10 things. So in other words, what we're doing is we're providing prompts which are far more carefully thought through, far more helpful than raw use of GPT by itself. And then we have an audit trail as to exactly the draft that they put in, the feedback the GPT gave, and then we ask them to explicitly acknowledge the ways in which the GPT do the work. So in other words, that's the only, look, for us, we've decided that's the only way we can deal with it. And we've been lucky to have enough funding to have software engineers who've been able to build this API. So we have a software environment called CG Scholar that we work in, and it has an API where we tunnel into GPT. But then the most important thing are the prompts that we put on top, and the way in which we do it. So we're if you like, we're in control of the collaborative relationship between the student and GPT, and we can see what that relationship is, and it's explicit, and we can run analytics through it, and we can work out what's going on. But apart from that, there is no way of dealing with this. And to go back to my original point, pontificating about ethical behavior, look, all the pontificating in the world didn't stop people buying their essays from essay mills, right? But now it's cheap, and everyone's going to do it all the time. And there's going to be no way of knowing ever who does it and who doesn't. So, unless we take control of generative AI ourselves, it's going to be a losing battle.
Okay, for sure. And yes, Professor.
I'm excited to kind of just to bounce off that comment that that we can't stop people from cheating. And so let's suggest that if people are cheating on some basic stuff because it's so trivial to put ChatGPT onto it, let's rethink that. So yes, we want people to do critical skills, and I can talk about that in a moment. But my solution to this and others is that we make things zero cost for the students, meaning that if you want, say, students to learn some elementary ideas, stuff which ChatGPT can tell you immediately, you need to do two things. One is set the cost to getting it wrong to zero, so that students can kind of repeat doing it. And the second thing is motivate students. So the idea of saying, look, student is actually working on this quiz or auto-generated thing, ideally with questions which are new each time, etc. And they're doing it because they want to learn, not because they want the points. Because if you want points, guess what? People are lazy and they do it for ChatGPT. And so you package this as a stepping stone in order to get to the more interesting stuff. Right, and you don't put like big short deadlines around it. Instead, you say, okay, try to do it this week, etc. And keep doing it, until you can perfect these basic, elementary, boring, like recall skills or something else low on the kind of Bloom's taxonomy. Because all the interesting stuff is going to just assume you know how to do this. And another kind of point on here is early on is to show people's ignorance. So I kind of mentioned this on a previous point, is that you can have advanced quizzes which people take before they know anything in order to demonstrate that they don't know something. And that's their only real purpose, is you like show interesting questions at the beginning of a course, which students say, oh, okay, one of my motivations now is to be able to actually get to the level where I can answer these. And that's the only purpose of that assessment. But then later on in your course, now you can expect greater things where ChatGPT and other stuff is generating stuff. Now, I want to get to the kind of evaluation stuff, and we keep talking about how these tools generate poor quality content. Let's use that as an advantage. Let's ask students to create things with mistakes in, and then use peer learning and peer evaluation to identify mistakes. There will be some mistakes because of the ChatGPT, because of the students' incomplete knowledge, and because of the students' craftiness in trying to get things past other students, which therefore kind of also makes it fun. And so, we can actually then ask students to spend time on deep engagement with their content. And so kind of that's personally why I think we should be going with these kind of tools tomorrow is creating imperfect artifacts, because that is where ChatGPT currently is. Last kind of quick comment on these tools is that they don't do well with larger amounts of context. And so what's the role of the human today? Well, to bring nuance. As students, it's very easy to say, I've got a problem, here's the solution, right? Instead, quite often in the workplace, you say, well, okay, but when's that solution fail? What's the landscape of solutions? So, maybe I should be writing in a different language. Maybe I should be presenting my court case in a completely different way. Maybe right? And to actually kind of bring about that flexibility of thinking in this, in a conceptual space is ultimately where we need to get to. And I'm excited about ChatGPT and these other generative things because they can help us put together prototype solutions quickly and therefore see how they relate and therefore see how persuasive they are or where they fail, etc. Which in a way which is not possible before, when it would take us a week or more to make just one solution.
Oh yeah, for
I think
sure.
one of the things you're highlighting here is the importance of the authenticity of the activity that you're having students do. I mean, think about it from this perspective. If I ask students to ask a very surface level question, and I ask all my students to do the same thing, then I'm going to get very bland responses and not a lot of really creativity or depth to what they say. But if I ask them to do something that's really meaningful, prepare to go in front of a board, prepare a report that's going to be delivered to your boss, or write a memo of what you would say to the public relations department if you're laying people off and you recognize that this is a small community in which you are the sole employer. I mean, there are things that are really meaningful that people can be, that students can be much more differentiated in their responses, and we'll get deeper conversations or reactions from other people.
Okay, so getting to the subject of differentiated responses that some people might get when it comes to AI tools, right? Because let me tell you all, I can use ChatGPT, or I can pay for the premium version of it. I can use Grammarly for my essays, or I can use the premium version of it, which is going to tell me how I can make it much more, flowery in terms of the tone of it, and offer me more suggestions because I have the money to spend for it. So now let's look at it from the diversity and inclusion perspective, right? Because I've noticed it amongst my own peers. There are some people who are willing to spend that extra money while some aren't, because they feel it's not worth it, and probably also because they cannot afford to pay for it, because it's like a monthly subscription, right? So this one thing I wanted to ask Professor Kang, like what do you think educational administrators can do, like a self for making AI technologies accessible to students? Or do you think that is a problem that we should solve? And if yes, how can we do that?
That's a very good question and important question. I think I don't actually know what kind of efforts the university have made so far in general. I don't have much idea about that. But the accessibility and equity issues are really critical, like probably for kind of different reasons. So one more like if there is if everyone has the same access to that kind of technology, right? So that's one really big concern that probably university itself, like we should ensure that all students, staff, have access to all resources and support, regardless of their background or their financial stability. But also, like, we can probably try to get some community partnerships that, like, we can collaborate with some local organizations or businesses or nonprofit organization to secure some funding, maybe some donations. Maybe it's happening already. I'm not really aware of that much, but also another thing is like how these technology are designed well for the students, like people with like different difficulties, right? So if those technologies are like have some accessibility features, like if we provide any different modes of features like text to speech or any closed captions or some adjustable like font size and something like that, so that to accommodate students with disabilities. So that's another probably issue related to universal design for learning. Another issue I was thinking is like about, so we can bring technology, let's say we can bring technology and everyone has tools or the devices that like maybe we can, people got those tools like from somewhere. But like, does everyone knows how to use it? Like, I know we have so much, like a lot of fascinating ideas about how to use these tools, but do we have enough training that we can actually offer students or even teachers that like to know like how to use those efficiently, effectively, or constructively? So I think that's another issue I really want to kind of bring up, that like if everyone really is ready to use those tools. Yeah, that's just one issue I kind of want to bring up, but yeah, so that's probably pretty much it.
I think one of the exciting things about generative AI, and we're seeing this with some of the work that Khan Academy is doing, is the ability to personalize to every individual. So even if I'm the best instructor I could possibly be, and I only have a class of 30 students, I'm still not able to really individually know each one of those 30 students and to personalize my instruction directly to their needs and interests. And this tool gives us the opportunity to develop ways of doing that, to be able to individually reach out to every single student on their interests, their needs, and their learning gaps, and be able to provide them with just the information they need. Now, we're not there yet, of course. We still have a lot of work to go to get there. But that seems to me to be the biggest opportunity that we have here. If my students are able to access learning in a way that is most meaningful to them, then they're going to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I apologize to our panelists on here. We actually are at a time crunch. There's only 3 minutes left. So I'd like to summarize this conversation, right? So I just, wanted to add myself, as a student, it's really good to know that the professors have a good understanding of how AI works and, what we can do, because I see that there's some good progress when it comes to actually implementing those policies. So I hope the other attendees who have come from across the world on here will also try to, think about how they can implement it into their curriculum, because all of our students are willing to use AI, right, to enhance or maybe not enhance our learning. So, I personally feel, that when I come to college as a new student, I'm given the orientation. For me at UIUC, I was given engineering 100, right? So, if I as a student have been communicated by faculty or by someone who's teaching me how I am supposed to approach these tools, what's the right way to use it, what's the wrong way to use it, what their opinion on that is, that really clears it in my head, and it also raises a certain awareness for all my other peers, right, as to what the stance is for for the actual institution that they're in. So I feel that communication is very important, so that makes it clear to the students what is ethical and what is unethical according to students. Rohan, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I obviously we're, like you said, we're on a time crunch, but I just wanted to sort of talk about just overall what I feel about, obviously AI use in the classroom. What I sort of noticed, and I feel like some of my ideas just in general, that like obviously, using these AI tools, and like I said earlier, it's both a gift and a curse. But what I've realized is that, end of the day, all these AI tools, chat bots, whatever, like, obviously what was mentioned earlier was Khan Academy, their creation of, how they're using AI to create learning plans, and Khan Migo and other, AI bots. End of the day, what I've noticed is that like these AI models, end of the day, they're created by humans, right? So I feel like, and even something that Dr. Means brought up earlier is that we should also focus on teaching students how to learn more necessarily, and not just teach them the specific technicalities, right? Because end of the day, like when you're, especially with what I've realized with computer science, it's less about coding. It's only 10% coding and 90% problem solving, designing, things like that. And I feel like those are things that, AI models, they're not necessarily, not necessarily is a strong point. I feel like creating a solution, there's a problem somewhere, and having the intuition to think of what are the different solutions, where can I apply what I've learned in computer science to create a solution, and then figure out a roadmap from A to B. I think those are things that, even having like more open-ended assignments, projects in the classroom will make students realize, think about, using those kinds of strategies, using that kind of problem-solving mindset. And once they figure out, oh, this is how I'm going to solve this problem, this is how I'm going to get, this is point B, this is how I get from A to B, then coding is only 10%. And coding is, again, ChatGPT may not be 100% accurate about that all the time, but I think the more critical learning and critical thinking aspect, and what computer science really is really creating an effective and efficient solution for specific problems and for just products in general. So I think that's where, most of the learning should come from, in my opinion, as what I've observed as a student. But that's all I want to.
Yep, thank you, Rohan. And actually, like I said, right, we're on a time crunch. So I'd really like to thank all you guys for your time. It's your precious time. I really appreciate you guys coming on here, and thank you for your perspectives. Just wanted to reiterate the fact that we will be having a conference report and recordings of the sessions that we'll be sending out to you. So be on the lookout for that. And I really do apologize to all the questions in the chat that were left unanswered. We will definitely go through those questions and make sure that they're answered. So yeah, once again, thank you so much. We'll be having the closing session going on right now. So yeah, see you guys there, and thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure meeting you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Pleasure.